Everyone wants to hate Nintendo right now for coming up with a patent that covers summoning pets in games. It just doesn't seem fair. This mechanic has been going on forever. But once you take a look at it, you realize that outside of the Palworld suit, this patent is worthless. It means nothing, and I'll tell you why. Here's everything that a game has to do in order to fall within the scope of that Nintendo patent. First, a game has to cause a character to move around a field based on where a player tells the game that the character should move. Then, the game has to cause a pet to be summoned where the player tells the game the pet should be summoned. And if there's an enemy within an area next to the pet, the game has to cause the pet to fight that enemy based on how the player tells the game that the pet should fight the enemy. This is called a first battle mode. But if there's no enemy next to the pet, then the game has to take control of the pet and move it in a certain direction based on where the player tells the game that the pet should move. And once the pet gets next to an enemy, the game has to cause the pet to fight that enemy according to something called a second battle mode. And the second battle mode, because of the way it's worded in the patent, has to be different from that previous battle mode. And finally, the game makes the pet fight that second battle mode according to the player's input again. In other words, it takes the input from the player and causes the pet to fight the enemy at a distant location in a way that's different from if the enemy was located at the first pet summoning place. Whew, that's a mouthful. But you see what I mean? And if every single element of what I just said is present, then the game falls within the Nintendo patent. But even if one thing is missing, one single step of what I said, then there's no infringement. The game doesn't fall within the Nintendo patent. And that's why that patent is worthless, because there's too many steps, there's too many elements, and this patent is way too narrow to apply to anything outside of one of Nintendo's own games, the Scarlet and something Pokemon game, and possibly the Palworld game.